This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 27th of November 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm 2.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, BBI splits Ruto camp. The Standard, RAILA, I was not duped. And The Star, what RAILA gave up as Ruto plans to support BBI. I think all of these headlines speak to the same issue. We are now on the train to the referendum.
Yes.
And Ruto is deciding whether or not to board this moving train. And RAILA is said to have been duped. I think let's just tackle them all together.
Absolutely. There is a Daily Nation, and I want to start on that theme. They say BBI splits Ruto camp, and it seems so. It seems obvious. Two of his very close allies, that's Moses Kuria and Millicent Omanga, seem to like the current BBI document. And especially this Millicent Omanga, she said that the contentious issues have been addressed on BBI. But William Ruto seems to keep saying that we want consensus. We want consensus. Let me tell you, hypothetically speaking, this man does not want anything to do with BBI. And by the way, it is bad manners to address your boss on Twitter, leave alone not even attending his function. And in my view, he's behaving suboptimally. And we always say here that if you see someone behaving suboptimally, it is because they're nested in more than one game.
Yes.
But I also want to say the following, that whatever he does, whether fight, accept, it doesn't matter. What RAILA and Uhuru are playing here is called the war of attrition. And the war of attrition is a prolonged period of war where each side seeks to gradually wear down the other side using small scale of actions. Small scale of actions are many, and we can see them. I'm not saying that they're using them, but ICC is there. Let him choose about, is it ICC he wants to fight? Is it BBI he wants to fight? By the time 2022 gets there, I don't think this man will have the energy to continue
I
fighting.
think what's even worse is that his army, the DP's army, is so confused. It's like a bunch of apes trying to form a line, and they don't know how to do it. And I say this for multiple reasons. Millicent Omanga, did she not tweet saying that our concerns have been addressed? And then she then went back on it and said, what did she say?
I have reported the illegal impersonation and mischievous intrusion on my Twitter account to the authorities, and I demand immediate action.
Apes, right?
Apes.
Another point.
Apes.
I think we all saw Itumbi when he went to court and was attempting to make some points that went terribly, and he was quite embarrassed.
He was kicked off by that judge.
So I think if you're going to, make such a big stand and try to look like a man, at least do it properly, do it successfully. Apes.
Yes.
Another one I can give is Newsnight on Monday, where you had Aaron Chariot attempting to break down the BBI and show that it was a failure.
Is he an ape?
Apes. I mean, I think that it's so embarrassing that the Tanga team can't even get themselves in order, yet they're representing the deputy president.
Because they have to backtrack. As was said, their provisions and their proposals were included into the BBI. And if you're at all we're conceding, if I concede some, then you concede some, then shouldn't we all be supporting BBI?
Apes. So I think that the honest truth is, if you don't know, then just be quiet, right? I think it's more embarrassing for you to come and show how unintelligent you are than for you to just retreat, get your, pieces in order, and then come back with something meaningful.
But again,
apes.
Okay, last one. I'd like to address the perceived elephant in the room. Raila Odinga, when making his statements at the signature launch, was stated to have said that, and this is common practice in very mature democracies, political parties choose the IEBC that is going to mediate the election that they're subjecting themselves to.
Absolutely.
And he said that this provision was removed from the original draft, and that the draft that we will be voting on will not have this provision. Well, I'd like to say, and ably stated by Mr. Sifuna, that the changes that have been made, the proposal was that we conceded, and it is still an option that is on the table. Some things will be part of. In fact, he says BBI has 3 sections: policy proposals, legislative amendments, and constitutional amendments. Now, we take something down from a constitutional amendment to a legislative one, and you say we've been duped. I agree. It is still on the table, and it is proper practice.
Yes, it is. Yeah, in the United Kingdom and in the UK, they both have that practice where each party nominates their IEBC equivalent or their election commissioners, and that's just to ensure equality, but also to have it's checks and balances, right?
Yes.
If one party can nominate theirs and the other party can nominate theirs,
Keep
it
each
means
other in
that
check.
during the electoral process, you have both eyes on the situation.
Yes.
So now I'm going to take us to our 3 headlines. We're looking at them together. We have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is the headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking, thoughtful, or just plain lazy? What do we think about these 3 headlines?
I think we tossed the star. I don't think RAILA gave up anything for the BBI.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the point of consensus is to debate.
Yes.
Then also the standard goes because he wasn't duped.
Yes.
That is true.
That then leaves us with the Daily Nation.
I like
What
that one.
do
I
we
like.
think?
I think it's accurate. Yeah.
Anything that splits them, fantastic.
Behaves.
Then we have our winning headline, Daily Nation, BBI splits Ruto camp. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, are they humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy?
You have Ndula, the Daily Nation, caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga dressed in a khaki suit, and they are singing to reggae. And the caption there is BBI signature tune is
Back.
And yes, and absolutely. And for those that think that it will be defeated, it will not be defeated.
Yes.
It will be pushed down your throats. And,
In fact, speaking onto your war of attrition, if you're playing a war of attrition, then you need to have either resources to sustain it or you back down.
Precisely. So if you're planning on doing a campaign in 2022 and also doing a no campaign, please choose one because
You cannot do both.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
Elections are expensive affairs.
Yes, and I think they have been running a campaign to turning someone's taps.
Yeah, you can't stop a good thing. Should we park this cartoon for the meantime?
I think so.
Park it.
All right. In the Standard.
Next one is the fallen legend. His name is Diego Armando Maradona, who died yesterday. Born 1960, died 2020. I think that is quite an apt cartoon, and it's good to remember a legend.
Yeah.
It's a tribute to
a
him.
legend.
Tribute to a legend.
I think we park it as well.
Yes.
And finally, the star.
And the star, who is this fellow? Is this COVID? Is going for black shopping?
It's the
Yes.
Grim Reaper.
The Grim Reaper, and he's
He's shopping for Black Friday.
He's shopping for Black Friday, and wondering where to go. One side is prominent personalities. Second is principal teachers and students. The next is doctors, nurses, and medical staff. Well, this I think
Maths chosen aisle.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this is it's a reality of our times. You just never know who is going to get. Yeah, but
Who's gonna catch it next? Yeah,
I think we
it's
toss it.
It's a dark cartoon.
it's a dark cartoon.
That's
I don't
kind
like
of
it.
funny, but also
Yeah,
sad.
I don't like
I
dark
think we
jokes.
toss it.
Oh,
I think we
okay.
toss it.
Yeah, all right.
But in the same vein, I think we remain with the Standard, which is the Standard. Diego Armando Maradona.
Well, we're not particularly tossing the Daily Nation, but if we weigh them both,
Yes.
Diego
tossed it.
Maradona, a tribute versus the reality of this times.
Yeah. I think a
we take
tribute
the
is more
tribute.
fitting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then we have our winning cartoon from the Standard.
Excelente.
On to our final thought, but before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli.
I have never heard your voice go that high.
Let me tell you, it's because I love this book.
Book.
This week we're looking at political theorists, and on Monday we looked at a book, Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. The book gives observations about equality and individualism. The author believed that equality was the greatest political and social idea of his era, and he felt that the United States offered the best example of equality in action. On Tuesday we explored the book The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. In the book, Simone investigates the popular definitions of femininity. She asks in the book, what is woman, and argues that in society man is considered the default, while woman is considered as the other. Woman is not defined as herself, but as relative to the male. And she concluded that these definitions have been used to suppress women throughout the ages. On Wednesday, we delved into the book The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. In the book, Fanon presents a study of the process of decolonization from the psychological perspective of the native. By exposing different paths taken to decolonization in Latin America, Fanon argues that in most cases, the national bourgeoisie remained dependent on foreign markets after the country was freed. Using these examples, Fanon argues that decolonization can only happen by way of a violent struggle between the settler and the native. On Thursday, our final thought was inspired by the book The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt. In the book, the author derives totalitarianism from three things: anti-Semitism, overseas imperialism, and with its underpinnings of the nation state, and tribal nationalism. According to Arendt, history has given us only two truly totalitarian states: Hitler's Germany and Stalin's USSR. Today we're looking at The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli.
Our Fifth Estate favorite, and
yes.
2M's favorite book. So we know that Machiavelli contributed a large number of important discourses, not only in Western thought, but I think just generally in all political theory, right? But also in history, Italian literature, the principles of warfare, but also diplomacy. But Machiavelli never actually seemed to consider himself to be a philosopher. In fact, he completely rejected philosophical analysis. But the funny thing is, sometimes when you read his book, you can tell that his thoughts are unsystematic, they're inconsistent, there's lots of contradictions. In one rule, he tells you one thing, and then in another rule, he says the opposite. But I think the purpose for him was that he really tended to appeal to experience and examples rather than rigorous logical analysis. So what we had in the past is that previous political theorists believed that the use of political power was only rightful if it was exercised by a ruler who had a personal moral character and they were very virtuous. And so you saw that many rulers back in the day were counseled that if they wanted to succeed, they had to behave in accordance with conventional standards of ethical goodness. And in a sense, it was thought that rulers did well if they did good.
Yes.
That they earned the right to be obeyed and be respected if they showed themselves to be virtuous and morally upright. But Machiavelli completely turns this on his head, and he criticizes this at length, this moralistic view of authority. Because for him, he said there is no moral basis on which to judge the difference between legitimate authority and illegitimate authority. Rather, he says that authority and power are actually co-equal. That whoever has power has the right to command. But goodness does not ensure power, and you don't have moral authority over people just because you're good. He says that the only real concern of a political ruler is the acquisition and the maintenance of power. I really like that.
Yes.
And so one of the most interesting things he brings up in this book is the separation of politics and ethics. So classical political theory, and I think we see that in some of the books we did this week, they really link those two things together, morality and politics. But Machiavelli argues that political action must always be considered in light of practicality, rather than lofty ideas about are you good and whatnot. And so he is far less theoretical in how he writes, and many thinkers before him had constructed these ideals of natural states. But Machiavelli uses evidence pragmatically to ground the things that he says in this book. And of course, if we think about the context of which this was written, he was writing it for the Medici family, who were the then rulers of Florence.
Yes.
And it's very apparent that he actually intended for his advice to be taken seriously. He didn't want to think about the divine rights of leaders and monarchies and all of that stuff that we've seen before. For him, it was a practical guide rather than an abstract treatise of philosophy.
Right.
And I think that's why we always talk about the virtues of being bad rather than the virtues of being good, because goodness doesn't actually pay off, does it?
Fantastic.
Now, speaking right to
oh yeah,
I know you're preaching to this choir.
You're speaking my language. Now, if you want to study Uhuru Kenyatta's second term, please read this book. And and I can say this, and I think this is what has happened. Uhuru's second term has been shaped by the prince, right? And I'm going to summarize my takeaway from this book in using 3 lessons. Lesson number 1: do not neglect the act of war. Now, according to Niccolo Machiavelli, is the first way to lose your state is to neglect the act of war, and encourages every prince to study warfare in peacetime so that they may reap in profit in times of adversity. Has Uhuru Kenyatta used the jeshi in times of peace? Yes. Is he benefiting from the fruits of adversity in the times of peace?
Oh yes.
Absolutely. And it's because of jeshi. Lesson number 2 is every prince must adopt a unique standard of morality. And the code here is, please be a bastard.
Oh my goodness.
Now, what Machiavelli has done is he's blurred the traditional border between virtue and vice. And Machiavelli argues that a prince must adhere to a unique standard of morality, often acting in defiance of good faith, of charity, of kindness, and of religion in order to safeguard his state. Has Uhuru Kenyatta ignored Sonko? Has he ignored his dissident deputy? Absolutely.
Yeah, abandoning the good faith.
Yes, so unique standard of morality, adopting a unique standard of morality. Now, third lesson is finish your enemy with finality. Now, this is what he says. He says people should either be caressed or crushed. If you do them minor damage, they will get their revenge. But if you cripple them, there is nothing they can do. If you need to injure someone, do it in such a way that you do not have to fear their vengeance. Is it going to happen? I think so. Is it already happening to others? Please, where is Sonko?
I will begin by asking this question. Why are we still reading this book, The Prince, which was written over 500 years ago?
Why?
Without a doubt, I have to agree that it is important in the history of political thought. As Tuje has told us, before Machiavelli, the ancient tradition that goes back to Aristotle was politics was a sub-branch of ethics. And ethics being defined as the moral behavior of individuals, and politics being defined as the morality of individuals in social groups or organized settings. So if you are moral as an individual, then the assumption is you would be moral as a society, and politics was a subdivision of that.
Same.
However, what Machiavelli did was that he made that distinct division between ethics and politics. Personally, I would prefer that they were still united, then we'd have fewer problems like the ones we have today. However, that is an important point that he does. In fact, it gives us a good reading of looking at the world from a particular point of view, a realist point of view, a very distinctively realist point of view. Unfortunately, I don't think The Prince was even read by the person to whom it is dedicated and written for, de Medici, Lorenzo de Medici. And in fact, it is not clear, though 2M may differ with me, if it has helped any leader in general. However, I will say this, and I will point to something that you have said. Is it better? One of the good ways of looking at Machiavelli's point of view is the question he asks: is it better to be feared or to be loved? And I know that you will say it is better to be feared than to be loved, and I will even quote what he says. Since it is difficult for a leader to both be feared and loved, it is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two must be lacking. For this can generally be said of men, that they are ungrateful, fickle, liars and deceivers, avoiders of danger, greedy for profit, and as long as you serve their welfare, they are entirely yours, offering you their blood, their possessions, their life, and their children.
Amen.
When the occasion to do so is not in sight, and when you are faced with it, they turn against you. Because love is held by a link of obligation, which, since men are wretched creatures, as described earlier, is broken every time their own interests are at stake. But fear is held by a dread of punishment, which will never leave you. And I know that you believe in this, but I'm going to say this, and it is actually a fact. Unfortunately, the pure realism of The Prince has not led to any direct or concrete effect on political history. But utopian texts, and I'm going to call them utopian texts, such as Plato's The Republic and Karl Marx's Das Kapital, have had a more significant impact and effect on reality. In fact, Karl Marx's description of a utopian future communist state have inspired socialist movements and led to political revolutions world over. In fact, I will end by saying the human imagination, not realism, is the truly revolutionary force of this world.
I don't think 2M is buying that.
To ensure that I have no dissent, and using 2M's realism of true and total domination and totalitarianism, I will end this episode. Today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from The Standard. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel again, and we are on your TV screens. You can find us on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times.
And you should come round.
I'll leave you with a quote, and this is for yourselves as you go into the weekend. Two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. I'm not sure about the universe, says Albert Einstein. This is for you to have a great weekend.